Hi, Jerry Handlon here, and this is part of the Go Show. And the segments of the Go Show that you're seeing now are part of the programming that the Park District wanted to get involved with in terms of our military forces, our servicemen and women who are serving for our country right now. We've had the Marine Corps on, and today we're very fortunate to have two representatives from the United States Army. We have Captain
Kirchgessner. Go by Captain K, makes it easy.
Captain K.
Yes.
Thank you, Captain. And Sergeant?
Sergeant Guimond. Usually Sergeant G works also.
Sergeant G and Captain K.
Yes, sir.
Gentlemen, thanks so much for being here.
Certainly, Jerry.
We wanted to ask about the Army, and in today's day and age of people joining the military and all, what does the Army looking for in the youth, in men and women today?
Okay. Well, the answer to that, pretty basic, looking for our target audience, 17 to 24-year-old young folks. And what we're looking for is three things, essentially. Folks that are aptitudinally ready, in other words, they can pass the military entrance exam. Folks who are morally qualified, in other words, have stayed out of trouble with the law. And folks that are physically qualified, they can essentially pass their physical with no sort of physical issues from their background.
Okay. Now, in a physical exam, do you give them an actual physical strength type test, or is it besides the general physical exam of the medical issues?
Well, no, it's not really much of a physical test like you're talking about, like a physical fitness test. It's just more your basic background health, looking at things like broken bones, any sort of issues with asthma, diabetes, things of that nature. So not so much the physical fitness.
Right. So, Sergeant, do you have the same kind of qualifications for the women who want to join the Army?
The actual physical qualifications are about the same. Their physical training standards are a little bit lower than it would be for the male. They do less push-ups. They have a little bit longer of a run time. Other than that, it's pretty much the same.
Now, you mentioned testing, mental testing. You give them a test at the recruiting station?
Well, they get two tests. The first one they will get is at the recruiting station, and that is essentially a practice test, which kind of helps us to gauge where they're at. But the official test the Army recognizes, and all the branches of service recognize, is called the ASVAB, is the Armed Services Vocational Aptitude Battery.
That's easy for you to say.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that is administered at the MEPS site there in Des Plaines, Illinois.
Okay.
And so based on the score they receive there is determine whether or not they're qualified for entry into the service.
Now, if someone comes in and says, I'm really a man or a woman, says, I'm interested in, I want to join the Army, but I'd really like to know what kind of educational opportunities are there for me. What can you tell them about that?
Okay. Well, Sergeant Guimond probably gets that question all the time, so I'll let him answer that.
Usually, we tell them it's based on the job that they get. A lot of times, if they pick a mechanic type job, they can take that out back into the civilian world, transfer it into an ASE certification, which would be the same as you would get at ITT Tech or something, the equivalency of that. Food skills, you can get those just like culinary foods, things like that. We have MP, which is military police, so they could bring that into the law enforcement side of the world too. So a lot of the stuff that we have in the Army transfers into civilian world. Okay.
Now, if someone comes in and says, excuse me, Sergeant G, I would like to pursue mechanics. I'd like to be a mechanic. I'd like to work on vehicles, the Army vehicles. But then they take the test, and the test shows that they're really not, their aptitude isn't necessarily in line with that kind of work. Do you tell them then, look, the mechanics may not be your line of country,
right,
but you are structured maybe to do this? Is that kind of the way?
That is true. That's how it works most of the time. The ASVAB, like he was talking about, it's not just over intelligence. It also puts you in specific categories like mechanics, communications, combat, food, stuff like that. So they base those scores, they pick the job that would best fit that individual.
Okay.
So as you were saying, yeah, we could show him he wanted to be a mechanic, but he did better in communication. We're going to try and push him more towards the commo side because it's more fitting to him.
Okay. And everybody, men and women, go through the same, is it 8 weeks basic training?
That's correct.
8 weeks of basic training. And where they're sent, they don't all go to the same Army post for basic training.
That is also correct. There are 5 basic training posts. They're located at Fort Knox in Kentucky, Fort Benning in Georgia, Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri.
Where's the other two?
Fort Jackson, South Carolina, and Fort Sill, Oklahoma.
Oh, okay.
So of those 5 basic training posts, 2 of them, Fort Benning, Georgia, as well as Fort Knox, Kentucky, are male only. And that is, yes, and that is based in part on the follow-on training for some that is conducted there is combat arms specific infantry jobs and armor jobs, which are specific to male only.
Okay.
So typically you will only have males going to those posts, but of the 5, 3 of them are both male and female.
Now, of those 3 that are both male and female, does a person have a choice as to which one they could go to? Or is that's dependent
It's basically based on the job and where they train it at. They try to put the person through basic training at the same post where they're going to have the job.
Okay.
So you don't really get a choice. It's kind of like needs of the Army.
Now, when they finish basic training at the end of that 8-week, do they still have the, and I still have because of a long time ago I was in the military, do they have like what was referred to then as advanced combat training where you go for another 4, 8 weeks of further training? Or do you go right into your specialty?
Directly into your specialty training after
Oh,
basic
you do?
training. Yep.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
And that depends, the schools, I guess, vary in terms of what you're going to pursue
Certainly.
as an option.
Over 215 different jobs to choose from, and each one has a different schooling and different locations and so forth.
Wow. So now careers. Someone wants to, they come in there with the really intent of saying, you know, I think I'd like to make the Army my career. What incentives does the Army offer young people today to make their, are you, Sergeant G, are you making the Army your career?
I might be, sir.
How long have you been in now?
I've been in a little over 3 years.
3 years? Huh?
And I've done quite a lot in that 3 years.
Have you? So, and you've got how much more? Another year, 2 years?
I have about another 1.5 years in my initial contract.
I see. Okay. You can, you know.
So you can always re-enlist. That's one of the great things. We tell people do like 2 to 3 years, see if they like it or not. Most of the time they're going to end up liking it. They can re-enlist as much as they want.
Okay. And then there's an incentive, a monetary incentive
Exactly.
to re-enlist.
There's bonuses for re-enlisting also.
Now, is that the same for the officers as well, Captain?
It is now, and that's a recent change in the officer corps, because up until very recently, no. What would happen in the officer corps is you would fulfill your initial obligation for 5 years, depending on whether you went to military academy or ROTC, whatever the case may be. And upon completion of that time, you would sign basically what's called a statement that's voluntary indefinite, which basically says, okay, you're going to stay in for the rest of your time, but you can get out at any time. Very recently, they've created these new incentives where if you say, I will agree to stay on an additional amount of time guaranteed, then there are different incentives, some of them monetary, some of them involving advanced civilian education. In addition to that, duty station of choice, or if somebody wants to change the particular job they're in as an officer. So lots of different opportunities that have just come about literally within about the last 2 to 3 years.